Mullen, Building Accessible Chatbots.
Chatbots and conversational user interfaces are one of the emerging technology trends. They're everywhere nowadays. Banks and organisations, both large and small, are rapidly adopting them. But as the adoption has been happening quickly, the accessibility challenges haven't been universally understood. And unless we understand some of these difficulties, we will continue to build ever more complex digital services which aren't accessible. Just to recap though, a chatbot is a program which sits on a website which, when activated, it provides human-like responses to questions from users. It's not just confined to a website though. They're also found on other platforms such as Skype and Facebook. A well-created accessible website which follows best practice accessibility support can be rapidly undermined by providing an inaccessible chatbot. To maintain the accessibility on our sites, we need to follow several accessibility principles when building and deploying chatbots. 6 accessibility principles we need to follow. Choose a customizable platform. Ensure the conversation history is navigable. Conversation history is identifiable. Conversations are announced. And we need to also make sure all rich media returned is also accessible. One of the most important principles is to choose the right platform. If we choose a platform which is right for us, it would give us the best chance of building in that crucial accessibility support right at the start. There are plenty of bot platforms, and many provide pre-built components which allow you to drop on into your website and with minimal configuration have a working chatbot. It sounds too good to be true, and it is. This ease of installation comes with a significant disadvantage. Many of the controls have poor or non-existent accessibility support. They may use non-standard controls, have irregular tab ordering, poor colour contrast, and lack ARIA support, which won't announce changes in content to screen readers and other assistive technology. If you've begun developing a chatbot, how do you work out if it's accessible or may have problems? One of the best ways is visually. If you're building with the Microsoft bot framework and you have a control which looks like this on screen I'm showing a pre-built component from the Microsoft bot framework. It shows a heading, a text area control, and input to control. And in the middle is a message saying, "Hi, I'm a Q&A, your test bot. Say hi if you'd like to chat." If you have a control on your website which looks like this, there's a very strong likelihood it will be inaccessible. But that's not necessarily to say all pre-built components are problematic. Some of these may have really good accessibility support, but before committing to development and locking yourself into building on a less than ideal platform, test the control against the web accessibility guidelines. I'm sure many of us in the room have encountered accessibility claims of 100% accessible, and when tested, they're anything but. Unfortunately, software vendors are a little too liberal at times with the truth and may have wildly optimistic claims. Treat all claims of accessibility with an open mind until you have been able to confirm the results. Use accessibility experts, use your in-house knowledge, use external experts. So get an unbiased opinion of how the product actually is and how accessible the control is. A good bot platform will allow you to create your own custom UI. The closer you get to creating an interface in HTML and CSS, using standard elements in a standard way, such as links, buttons, and form elements, the more accessible it'll be, as all these native elements already have that strong support within screen readers and other assistive technology. By keeping it simple, this will mean we have the best chance of good accessibility support built in. It's easy to assume everyone uses the mouse and to not consider other forms of input devices. But some users may have a preference to using a keyboard, so make sure all messages in the conversation history can be reached from the keyboard. Add a tab index 0 on every message response. This allows a keyboard user to tab through the entire conversation history without having to use the mouse. On the screen is a conversation excerpt describing a typical bot conversation a user might have with a bank. The bot asks, can they book the user in? The user agrees. The bot asks where the nearest branch is. The conversation being described isn't important, but it shows the first bot message being focusable due to the tab index attribute. And if we continue to tabbing through the conversation history, it would alternate between the bot, the user, and the bot again. We also need to ensure every message is clearly identified. Is the message from the bot or is it from the user? Visually, we are able to identify parts of the conversation by using indentation or other styling. But if a user can't see the screen, we need to provide another way. By using the ARIA label attribute, when each message receives a keyboard focus, it'll announce through the screen reader the bot said, followed by the message, or you said, followed by the message, if it was a message from the user. It helps users who may have difficulty being able to identify a relationship visually. On screen, we have a message from the bot which reads, "What can I help you with?" It's contained in a div element which has some nice styling and also has a tab index of 0, which means it's reachable in the keyboard tab sequence. And it also has an ARIA label attribute, so when it receives a keyboard focus, the screen reader will announce the bot said, followed by "What can I help you with?" Visually, nothing's different and nothing's changed. But it's this extra code which makes what we see on screen much more accessible for assistive technology users. It's triggering extra supportive behaviour on the screen reader, and it provides that solid skeleton of accessibility support. One of the most important ones is every update must be audibly announced. By using the ARIA Live attribute, whenever there is new text, this is announced to the screen reader. On screen, the parent container has ARIA Live assertive, and the div in grey is "What can I help you with?" And this will be announced through the screen reader that this is the new content. Whenever a new message is received, this inner container has more text added. Due to how we've implemented ARIA Live regions, it only announces the new content, not everything within. If you attended Russ's workshop yesterday, you'll know all about ARIA and ARIA Live attributes. There are at least two values to provide for the ARIA Live attribute, assertive and polite. Both values only announce new content through the screen reader, but the values change the priority of how the new content is announced. A value of assertive will announce the new content straight away, whilst polite pauses until other on-screen screen reader announcements finish before announcing the chatbot text. There may be instances and there may be times where it's useful to allow the screen reader to finish reading out other text first before announcing new content. One of the real recent challenges is that many bot platforms can also return rich media in addition to plain text. Rich media is content other than text, such as cards with buttons which trigger responses, embedded videos and images, and these rich cards also need to be accessible. On screen are two rich media examples. The first one is advertising Surface Pro. It has an image of the Surface Pro for tablet, a heading, a subheading title, a bit of body text, and 3 buttons beneath. And the next rich text example is an image of Seattle, a bit about it with a Learn More button. When we're making these rich cards accessible, we need to make sure images have appropriate alt text. Or if the image is descriptive only, no alt text, but always have an alt attribute. Headings are properly structured, buttons are keyboard accessible, and links have a logical focus order. Ensure how the items are laid out visually on screen is the same way they'll be interacted with in the keyboard ordering sequence. One of the other big points is provide a skip link. Skip links allow a user to bypass on-screen the content and navigate directly to the chatbot. Due to the implementation of many chatbots in websites, they often feature in the lower left or upper right of the screen. Without an easy way to navigate to the chatbot, a user may have to tab through several page links before they can reach it. A skip link is a very convenient way for them to shortcut to the chatbot and reduce keyboard interaction. One of the best examples of skip links navigating to chatbots is found on the tax office's website. Within their skip links is a link which says skip to Alex Virtual Assistant, which is the name of their chatbot. When this link is triggered, it will bypass all of the content-heavy homepage and navigate directly to the chatbot. But accessibility doesn't just end at these 6 principles. Also think about the conversation is pitched at an appropriate age level, so reduce jargon, or if necessary, explain the jargon. There's a good colour contrast between the background to colour and foreground to text colour, and the focus order shows the most recent message first. Usually, all messages would appear at the bottom of the screen and bubble up. It's not about reducing the on-screen design to something simple and unattractive, but it's about providing a solid skeleton of accessibility support which works for everyone, regardless of challenges. When developing a chatbot, make sure you test these principles with users to confirm that you're actually delivering an accessible experience. We've made some assumptions with best practice accessibility support, and through my testing, it works pretty well. But I'm not necessarily the end user who would be using a chatbot daily and who would have impairments. Testing with users is the best way to determine what we have is being developed in the best possible way with the best possible accessibility support. Microsoft Bot Framework is one of the most configurable platforms if your development is centered around the .NET architecture. And although this sounds like a sneaky paid promotion, it's not. But avoid using the out-of-the-box web chat control provided by Microsoft, because any bots you produce using this control won't be accessible. Building your own UI in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript with ARIA attributes will give you the best outcome with accessibility. And the bot framework provides this flexibility for you to drop in your own user interface. Many bot frameworks offer fantastic potential for truly delivering accessible experiences for people with disabilities. But this means little to nothing if the core product, the web chat, isn't accessible. There is a tendency to start to embrace ever more complex technology, such as speech-to-text or facial recognition. But unless we're focusing on the core product to the web chat, it means little. Build and test to accessibility standards. Build and test to WCAG 2.0 or 2.1 AA. A further challenge to make accessible are voice-based UIs. Amazon Alexa, Apple's Siri, and Hey Google are voice UI based, and this will become more pervasive, where instead of interacting visually, we begin interacting through speech. But what are some of the challenges with speech? People with a speech disfluency, such as stutters, accents, English as a second language, all need to be considered when designing the experience. I myself have a stutter. Stuttering is a disfluency in the pattern of speech. It can be mild or severe, and it's often contextual based, and it's characterised by long pauses. I'm sure many of us in this room can relate when we attempt to book a taxi and the automated answer phone asks us for our home address. We know the answer phone bot rarely handles fluid speech well, so we talk really slow, really robotic. We wait for the pause, and the answer phone responds with an address which isn't yours. And we attempt to repeat it again, and it just gets worse and worse. Many organisations using voice UI on their support phones are many organisations who we rarely want to talk to. The bank, the tax office, the police, ambulance. We often use these support phones when we're at our most fragile emotional states. And in the case of stuttering, the condition is often exacerbated by stress. We're already frustrated and stressed by having to use the phone, which is often a fearful situation. We think, oh no, we now have to talk to a bot. We do our best to talk slow, and the bot never recognises our address. We speak slower again, and it gets worse and worse, and then funnels us off to a real-life support person. And by that time, we're so frustrated, the stuttering is often worse. Just as the case with web accessibility, when we build for the more challenging human conditions, everyone benefits. And this is equally true with speech capability. If we build with suitable tolerances in the software to ignore the gaps in speech, the misspoken, the repetition or blocks, then it means people using mobile devices in noisy environments, in clubs, in bars, in pubs, people who may have a temporary voice impairment, such as a sore throat, or that they've lost their voice, and people who are also distracted also benefit. When we build and design for the extremes, it means everyone benefits. Truly human-centred design. I was about to advance to slide 28, but there seems to be a problem with my laptop. So, in the absence of that, there are many pockets of really good accessible bot to design within the government. But as it's an emerging technology, the list is somewhat limited. However, the tax office's Alex and IP Australia are both really good example of accessible bot design. Both of them are using different platforms, but both have that really good accessibility support. Building an accessible for chatbot may seem daunting, but it's not. I've put up onto GitHub the full source code for Fenton, the accessible UI for Microsoft Azure-based bots. Not a good sign. However, the address for GitHub is github.com/canaxis/Fenton, and I've also provided an information card which has a companion website, which have 7 steps for building in accessibility. That address is canaxis, canaxes.com.au/infocard/chatbots. And on the basis of those gremlins, I'll say that's it.
Sorry about the gremlins. This room seems to have them in spades. We probably have time for at least maybe 1 or 2 quick questions. Anyone in the audience? I am coming to you.
I have a microphone just
2 things. Number 1, if it makes you feel any better, Siri often gets things I say wrong, and I just see it as an opportunity to throw a little bit of abuse. Number 2, more of a reflection, I guess. And you have actually touched on it, but obviously, accessibility, it does obviously assist people who have a disability, but do you subscribe and promote the slogan "Access for All"? Because disability, or it doesn't have to be permanent; it can be temporary. You can break your arm and need drag and dictate, or you can be outside in the sun. The glare can be really bad. You can't see your phone screen.
A great point, and I believe someone in one of the workshops or one of the presentations this morning made the point that accessibility isn't just for blind people. And I think with those examples you've mentioned, temporary impairments are just as important to building for. So if you have a temporary impairment with a sore throat or a broken arm, you're still impaired and you still need support around that. So I think moving the focus away from building for disabled people, traditionally people who are blind or in wheelchairs, is a good thing. As I think once we start to look outside what the norm is, we make a much more richer user experience for everyone, regardless of impairments.
Is it quick, Liz?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah. Just quickly, I noticed that the ABC chatbot, for instance, has a lot of, let's put it, sass to it. How do you deal with tone and delivery, especially in very serious contexts like the ATO maybe?
One of the best examples I've seen has been on the Commonwealth Bank, where it's very neutral language, but I was mucking around with a chatbot one night and I entered, "What is the meaning of life?" anticipating some ridiculous canned answer of, "Sorry, I don't understand." But the response was really eye-opening, where
42?
no, where it assumed that my fragile state was emotional, and it provided the number for Beyond Blue. And I thought, in that instance, looking deeply at it, you're on a bank's website. You may have a financial stress, and you might be in a very bad emotional place. But some UI or UX developer for a CommBank worked out that scenario and added a suitable safeguard. And I think that just shows that it's much more than just providing stock standard answers. I know that there's a trend of providing witty and sassy responses, but I think it's very much contextual based. You wouldn't necessarily want to have a smart-ass response on the tax office's website or the CommBank site. So I think the approach which CommBank took was that neutral tone, but also escalating up with better support mechanisms if it starts noticing a concerning user behaviour.
Alley Camp, October 2018.